Well, our guests today on Blue Sky say they are unapologetic in their pride. Not just their pride in their queerness, but also pride in place. I'm Leisha Grabinski, and today on Blue Sky, we will be joined by folks who have been involved in Social Made Local's Prairie Queer campaign. Our guests today are living authentically, and they have chosen to foster a supportive queer community right here, even if it means they have to work a little harder than folks in some of the bigger cities. But they say you can find community in some pretty small places in Saskatchewan. If you are queer and living here, how have you found community? What makes the Prairie queer scene so special? Call us at 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We have 4 people joining the conversation today, each bringing their own unique experience with what it means to live authentically as a queer person in Saskatchewan. And we're going to start with learning more about the Prairie Queer campaign by Social Made Local. Tyler Babiy runs Social Made Local. It's a queer-owned apparel brand in Saskatoon that creates space for queer creativity, representation, and visibility. Tyler, welcome back to Blue Sky.
Thank you so much for having me. I know my mom is thrilled.
Well, I'm thrilled too, and it has become a bit of an annual thing for us to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the support.
Yeah, and to hear more about the campaign. So, Social Made Local, loud and proud, unapologetically queer. Why is this important to you?
Yeah, I think, when I'm working on Social Made Local, which is an apparel brand, I think I'm always leaning towards how can I create opportunities for folks and representation for folks. I always kind of say that the brand is queer owned, but we certainly have folks that are not queer that model for us. But primarily it's queer focused, right? I mean, my experience in life is 100% queer. It doesn't get any gayer than this. Yeah, I think for me, it's important for me to, especially growing up in Saskatchewan when I was younger, there wasn't opportunities to, maybe be in a photo campaign or maybe work with an apparel brand in a way that was open and authentic, right? And I still think now, there's probably opportunities, but some of them might feel a little bit more like tokenist or maybe more like checking a box. And I really try with Social Made Local to make sure that people feel really represented and really seen and really captured in a way, through photos and videos and whatever illustrations they're doing that feels authentic to themselves.
Yeah, because they're very much part of the whole process, right? It's not just your idea. You're collaborating with people to get a sense of their experience. So tell us about that aspect.
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of like the glue that holds it together, so I connect a lot of the dots. I don't illustrate personally. I do photography and videography, so that's something that I do. And it's pretty cool to be able to sit down with different queer folks around, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, wherever around sort of the prairies, and just create content with them, right, that, is very authentic to, who they are and their experience as a queer person. And then with the illustration piece, we have Nick here today. And so I don't illustrate myself. So usually when we do illustrations, I'll connect with someone either in the community or another artist, and we'll work together on a collaborative idea. Typically, I'm bringing the art direction and sort of the ideas, and then we're collaborating together to figure out what that looks like, physically as a graphic representation, as a T-shirt. A lot of times that process it starts quite broad, and then towards the end it just gets into this color is not going to print well, or this line's too dark or too thin, or the technical stuff towards the end. But yeah, I just, with Social Made Local, I think, as I've been doing this for 8 years, at first I was just excited to sell some T-shirts. And then now it's just kind of evolved, and I've got, I think, a more mature understanding of what it is I want to do with the brand. And certainly this year has been exponentially more successful than other years, largely in part to the work that Nick did on this illustration for the Prairie Queer design. And yeah, I've had to make a lot of new policies on how I deal with intaking inquiries and sponsorship requests and influencer models and all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, and I mean, of course, I've had stuff like that in the past, and even Dragon's Den reached out to me to audition. So
really,
yeah, I didn't get on. I don't know if you know anyone. Anyway, just jokes. No, the timing this year was also really not great for me. But yeah, there's something this year with Social Made Local that it's picked up some sort of traction in the last 3 months, and certainly since this design got released, where now it's like, oh my gosh, if you're queer and you're excited, you've probably DM'd me and asked me for something. And I apologize for people it's taken me time to get back to. But yeah.
Is there something more behind that interest? And you keep talking about Nick. Nick, I'm going to talk to you in a moment. I'm very eager to talk to you. But I am curious about, because there's often a lot of rainbow washing at this time of year, and a lot of companies want to be doing the right thing, or they want to be part of this. They don't know how to be part of it. They may not be doing it in the right way. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Like, if are you primarily getting attention from the queer community, or is there something else at play?
It's a little of both. I've had some pretty outrageous asks from some very big organizations asking me for quite a lot of money to support queer events, which, while I understand the logic behind it, I don't need clout in the community. Like, I don't need to buy my clout in the community because I've built it with my 2 hands. It's a lot of folks with, just a lot of queer folks that there's just not a lot of opportunities, right? So I get a lot of people saying, oh my God, like, I found your brand. It's so amazing. And it's like, for them, it's like, I have to sometimes rewind myself and know, like, I mean, I've been slugging at this for 8 years, and then, slugging at being queer for almost 50. But like, I sometimes have to rewind myself to recognize that, sometimes when people first find the brand, it's like they're getting all the 8 years of stuff in like a couple posts, and then they like go into the website. So for them, it's super like fresh and new, and they're like excited by the concept, which is great because that's why I do the work. But I think sometimes, when you're just so in the thick of it, you're like, oh yeah, like people are finally catching on, which is like, how people always joke about that like overnight success that took 10 years.
But are you growing increasingly concerned about rainbow washing?
With other
companies, like you've carved out your space. This is what you're doing, but in general, is that a concern?
So I did a really awesome workshop about advocacy that had a queer focus, but it was just, generally advocacy. And they talked about this sort of like the spectrum of advocacy, right? So on one side, there's people that are actively advocating. Other side, there's folks that are, actively seeking to harm marginalized groups. And then kind of in the middle, there's like a couple neutral groups, right? So for me, I know we talked about this last time, and I know this is not always the most popular conversation among my queer peers. For me, when people put up a rainbow sticker and there's nothing behind it, partially I'm annoyed by that, but also partially I recognize that they might just be trying. They might be dipping their toe into the advocacy pool. They might be excited. They might also be like not out. Like, I know lots of people who've tried supporting queer folks and then 5 years later came out like late in life, right? So a lot of times people are dipping their toe in the pool and trying to be supportive, but they're maybe not doing it perfectly. And I think sometimes people can be a little irritated and be like, well, don't put up the sticker unless you're going to change all your policies and da-da-da. And my perspective is that I would rather encourage people that put up the sticker, and I'm just using that as like a broad thing, to say, hey, like that's great, but like, also like try to do a little bit, to like for your customer experience and for your employees and for your policies. And I like to think of that as more of just like, why would I squash that excitement, even if it's misguided? Because I mean, when I think about my advocacy work in any marginalized community, including the queer community like 20 years ago, it wasn't perfect. It's still not perfect. I still mess up. And I think it just is like giving people some of that grace. But I think sometimes too, like people also have to be accountable for, if they're causing, I don't want to say harm, but if they're just, sometimes it's just really bad manners or poor taste or like, when there's just misalignment, when it's sort of like something that I was reading in an article the other day was about how people are less and less viewing the queer community as a marketing asset these days. And so to me, I'm like, when you look at a queer community or any marginalized community and you look at it as like, if we invest in this, we can increase our revenue. And business, that is business. That is business. I get it. But also, it's not, you're talking about humans and peoples and human rights and universal human rights. So for me, when you're running a business, yes, you have to be profitable. If you're not profitable, you can't feed yourself, you can't donate, you can't hire people, you can't pay your taxes and help all those things. But also, I think when you are looking at marginalized groups as a marketing opportunity, I think you really have to look at how you're investing into those communities.
So how are you, Tyler, investing? And this will be the segue to Nick and all the other people we're going to talk to. But like, I kind of want you to think big, like social made local. Like, what are you doing?
Okay, so 5% of all sales go to typically a queer organization. As we've grown, it used to be more local. Now, because a vast majority of our sales are not in Saskatchewan, so now we have a more national partner. So we're working with Rainbow Railroad, so they get 5% of all of our sales all year, not just in June. But I also make every effort to pay people. Do you know what I mean? Like when I'm working with artists, we pay them. When we're working with models, we pay them. Sometimes we're working with community groups and they don't want payment because they want different types of exchanges, like whether that's different kinds of exposure. And all those things are negotiated like on a project-by-project basis. But to me, like even this year, I opted against doing like an influencer campaign with just some random influencer people. And I sent out shirts to 8 people around Canada that I felt were like interesting queer folks. Mm-hmm. And I did like kind of like a mini community. And it's funny because I'm like a mini community feature, but I'm like just like 8 people around Canada sending in stuff and organizing and posting. Like at this point that feels mini to me, but I get that for, maybe clients that I might with my other business coach for social media, then we would like, that's a lot of work. But I'm like at this point, I'm like, this is just like what I do like.
But I think what I'm hearing, like you're doing all these things, but you're investing in creating spaces for queerness.
Yeah.
And I think that's where these other folks come in. So Nick, who's sitting right next to you, you're both wearing the T-shirt.
Yeah.
Nick, I will properly introduce you here. Nick Hoffert, a Saskatoon-based tattoo and multidisciplinary artist who created this year's design in our Saskatoon studio. Nick, officially welcome. Thank you for being in this space. Do you want to start by describing the T-shirt and kind of picking up from some of the stuff Tyler has shared? These are big conversations that, you're part of.
Yeah. Tyler pretty much created a space for me to express myself and kind of a little bit of my identity in terms of like where I'm from. We really wanted to create something that a lot of people, not just in Saskatchewan, but just on the prairies can kind of relate to. Mm-hmm. We have like prairie flowers. We have... I'm just going to point to it.
Yeah.
We kind of subverted the pool logo, which is generally like, like...
The wheat pool?
Farmers,
mm-hmm.
And a lot of queer people grew up in small towns and have moved to larger towns like Saskatoon, Regina, Calgary, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a identifier of like, this is where we came from, where we all know farmers, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And like there are queer farmers, not a lot of us are farmers kind of thing. Yeah. And then we also have a really masculine cowboy and his unicorn, which it was Tyler's idea, and I kind of just like rolled with it and put a lot of my own style in there. But the idea was basically we want this really like masculine and really feminine kind of elements mixed in, and we're not trying to subvert any gender roles or anything. We're just, I don't know. And I said this in the blog that just went out this morning. You can be a cowboy and you can be queer. Doesn't mean you're not a cowboy, kind of thing. So yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing a bit of your own story? Where did you come from?
So I grew up in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and I wasn't out at the time. I moved to Saskatoon when I was about 12 years old, and like once I moved, my horizons broadened. I was immediately like, oh my gosh, there are more people in the world than just boys and girls who like boys and girls. And it was honestly quite shocking. It took me quite a while to figure out who I am in not just a small town. And I don't know, I think that moving to Saskatoon and saying that is kind of like, this is the tiniest city in the world. But
it's not Toronto. It's not Vancouver.
Exactly. It's a big city for people like me who grew up in a town of like 5,000 or less people, and there are so many more types of people than I could have ever imagined just in this small city. And figuring out where you are in relation to all of those other people is hard, but I think Saskatoon also has a really great queer scene, and we have a lot of folks who are not only invested in like queer rights and standing up for each other, but like intersectionality, which is really important.
What does that mean for people who may not be as familiar with that term?
So intersectionality is kind of where you combine, you have a lot of like social problems like sexuality, gender, race, that kind of thing. Intersectionality is taking those things and putting them together.
Seeing it as a whole.
Yeah. So we're not just talking about lesbians. We're talking about the Black lesbian experience. We're talking about, I don't know, like a trans experience, but with the lens of Indigenous history, that kind of thing. And myself as like a white person, I don't have a lot of personal knowledge of all these things, but I do have the responsibility to educate myself because my experience isn't the only queer experience.
And so you started to see more of that in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you go back to Kindersley? It's been many years since you did grow up there. Has anything changed in Kindersley? Do you feel like you can return to Kindersley as who you are now?
I probably can, and I do. I pass through there every once in a while. My dad still works out of there, and like I don't feel necessarily unsafe going through there. I had some friends in high school who had a GSA or a Gender and Sexuality Alliance in their high school, and they kind of just opening the door for more queer kids because there are queer children everywhere you go. There's just it's a matter of if they have space or not, kind of thing. Yeah. I personally find it quite uncomfortable to go back. Don't have a lot of fond memories, so I try to avoid it and work through that on my own time. I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on that. I don't have a lot of memories, honestly, from my childhood.
Yeah, hearing you talk about that, and then seeing you talk while you're wearing that T-shirt, that is very rural. It's very rural Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
You probably have just put so much thought into that.
It's been a lot. Actually, I got the call from the producer a couple of days ago, and since then have been having dreams of being in Kindersley. It's kind of like now this whole thing is coming back, and I'm like doing a full circle, being like, this is where I came from, this is who I am, and it's like this whole thing going on it's not. I wouldn't say it's like re-traumatizing. It's very eye-opening for me.
Yeah. Is that T-shirt for kids in Kindersley right now?
Yeah, it's for everybody. Honestly, it's for anybody who grew up like me or anybody who feels like queer things are just for folks who have their community, because sometimes we don't. We don't have the space, and it's really isolating and scary sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know. I want people to know that it gets better no matter where you are. You can always change where you are, and to, I don't know, be also proud of where you came from and your own experiences.
I want to pick up on that, hearing David share that last news story and talking about those athletes found safety in community. Tyler, how did it feel to hear that?
I'm not going to say anything. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think, I'd be curious to see what that exhibit's like, because I think, queerness in sport is something that's definitely, I think it's a little bit more at the forefront now, especially after shows like Heated Rivalry, where like everyone's talking about why are there no gay hockey players and why is there no this and that. And I think, it's a little different in women's sports than it is in men's, so there's some differences. So I'd be curious. I wasn't, and this is just my bad, I wasn't aware that we had a lot of like queer sports celebrities in Saskatchewan. Although Saskatchewan's weirdly progressive with certain things, so I could see that being a thing.
Yeah. What do you think of what we were just listening to Nick before the news break there? You've been listening to a lot of Nick lately.
Yeah.
You gave him a fist bump.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, though, just as you listen to people share their own experiences?
Yeah, like, I think I would really echo what Nick was saying, and, just saying that, like, I think for me, the core of this design is about seeing yourself wherever it is that you want to make home. And I think a lot of queer people feel that you have to move to a bigger city, like for safety or for population density or whatever. But I think there are a lot of people that either move away and come back. Like I moved away and came back to Saskatchewan. But I think there's a lot of people that just choose to make their homes where their home is. Yeah. And it's not for them even, that idea of displacement because you don't belong somewhere just because of who you choose to love or your identity is, I think, something that, maybe cisgendered straight folks don't always recognize. They have different challenges. I mean, everyone's got their own things. But I mean, it is something that even when I was growing up, I was not going to come out of the closet or whatever term you want to use till I was out of the province. So I moved away for school. Then I came out because even though I know my family's cool, but I still was I cannot risk living somewhere saying to people that I'm gay and not having a home. So I need to secure another place to live before I can speak my truth to my family. So this is experiences that shape you as a person, right? And I mean, at some point, obviously I came back to Saskatchewan, but this is the stuff you think about as a queer young person, right? It's not just being authentic. It's, will I have a place to live? Will I be able to support myself? Mm-hmm. Will I have supports around me? So to me, I think this Pride trip that we did this year is really about existing in places that are your home, right?
I want to bring another person into the conversation. Kelly Lamb was one of the models for the campaign this year. Kelly lives in Saskatoon, and that is where we've reached him right now. Kelly, welcome to Blue Sky.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Tell me a bit of your story, if you're okay. I think coming off hearing Tyler say that, that this is home, and even if you don't feel like you belong, this is where we're from. Does that resonate with you, Kelly?
Oh, absolutely. I was born and raised in Prince Albert, and I'd basically lived there my whole life until I moved here for university. So I haven't really known a home other than Saskatchewan. I've always been here. So it's never really in a serious way crossed my mind to even consider another place home. Saskatchewan's always where it's been.
But have you felt that sense of home? Have you had community throughout your years here?
I think I definitely had to find it. I think I had to grow into it. It wasn't something that came automatically, partially because of being in the closet, but also learning about the LGBTQ community in general. I didn't know any type of terminology or anything related to that type of thing until when I was 13 or 14, in a very formative age of my life where I had these feelings, but I couldn't put a name to them. So if you can't put a name to them, how can you find the community? So once I was able to gain that knowledge and to learn about these things, it was extremely important in my journey in finding that community.
So have you found that community now in Saskatoon?
Oh, absolutely. I love the queer community here. It's so welcoming. It's so warm and accepting. And it's just a place of no matter what your identity is, whether you feel comfortable in it or if you're exploring it, if it's more fluid, there's always a place for you here. And yeah, I love it. It's been great being here in Saskatoon.
Does that exist in Prince Albert?
I think it definitely does. At the time when I lived there, I was mainly in the closet, and I also didn't know it existed at no fault of their own. Shout out PA Pride. I love people there. I love them. They're awesome. But I just was not exposed to it, and I did not know it was there, so I just assumed it was not there. So once I became more comfortable in my identity, looking back, I'm like, holy smokes, there were places where I could have existed. I just didn't know, and I was too scared to. Very similar to Nick, actually. My main queer community when living in PA was in high school. We also had a GSA club, but we called ours Q&A. which stood for Queers and Allies, but everyone always called us the Questions and Answers Club. So it definitely caused confusion, but it was really fun conversation.
Kelly, I understand that you were part of a pretty big research project in school that had a profound impact on you, where you were learning from the older queer folks in the community. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was probably back in 2023, I would say late 2022, early 2023. And it never became a serious thought, but like Tyler mentioned, there's always this inkling thought in every like smaller town or smaller province queer person's mind of like, what would it be like to be in Vancouver or Toronto or in these like bigger cities where there are more people, and by having more people, larger community. I was tinkering with the idea of like potentially moving and trying to explore that. But then in university, I got put onto a research project, which was in collaboration with Queer Seniors of Saskatchewan. And it was a group project, and we were making a documentary covering the 30-year anniversary of sexual orientation being added as a protected class in the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code. So that's from 1993 to 2023. And we got to interview like people who were actively fighting for our rights from that time period. And genuinely, maybe the most life-changing thing I've ever done in university, because having these conversations with these people, they weren't doing it just because it was the right thing to do. They were doing it because like Saskatchewan was their home and they wanted to stay here, and they wanted their home to love them back the way that they loved it. So it was important for them to not only fight for these rights for future generations, but to fight for their rights for themselves so that they could thrive here just like everyone else. So that's like one of my most favorite things we ever done. I think it was supposed to be like a really quick, like 10-minute blurb documentary type thing. I think ours ended up being like 35 to 40 minutes. Like we really committed to it. And we really had to grind, but it was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
It's quite something, though, to hear you say that they wanted their home to love them back, which I think is like really, Nick, at the root of what the T-shirt is trying to say. Hey, like, does that sentence? Like, what does that sentence say to you?
It resonated with me, honestly. I love that you said that. I totally like agree with you. I think that the work that those people did was just kind of like a foothold for us to go off of. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in Saskatchewan, but I think like 30 years ago was a very different place here, even in Canada as a whole. But yeah, that definitely resonates with me.
Tyler, does Saskatchewan love you back? I mean, that's...
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. I mean, like, I think no place is perfect, right? Like, I mean, every province has their own, regional issues. Canada certainly has its issues. I think generally speaking, though, I think like the community here is pretty solid. And as someone who's lived in Montreal and lived in Calgary, I think one of the things I love about Saskatchewan from a queer perspective, but just also a life perspective, I think there's a certain accountability that you have when you live in a smaller center that you just don't have when you live in a bigger center, right? In bigger centers, I've always found that things were a little bit more transactional. It's kind of like if someone's not a fit, there's like 20 other people you can like, go explore and stuff with. Whereas like in Saskatoon, if you are the type of person that likes to tell people to, F off or burn bridges, that system doesn't last very long here. So people really have to, in effect, people have to kind of like get along for better or worse, right? So I think it just keeps people more accountable in the queer community. And I think it builds a different type of community when people are more responsible to each other than when you're in a community where everyone feels a little more disposable.
Yeah. We have a fourth person to add to this conversation, and I'm very eager to hear how Adedoyin grapples with some of this stuff, whether or not our homes love us back. Adedoyin has a few homes. Adedoyin Afolabi was a model attitler in previous years. We've had the chance to speak in the past, so we thought it was worth it to check back in with him. A lot has changed since that last conversation with Adedoyin. So, hello, welcome back to Blue Sky.
Hello, hi. I'm happy to be here again. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. So when we share that line that those older queer folks really wanted their home to love them back, you've got Nigeria as a home, you've got Saskatchewan as a home. How are you thinking about that line?
Yeah. When Kelly said that, that was something that really resonated with me because I think for the most part, that is also something that queer people in Nigeria are actively fighting for because we love Nigeria. Nigeria is home. Nigeria is an amazing place, but Nigeria wants queer people dead. So that can be quite a struggle to grapple with being raised somewhere and loving that place, and that is where you've known all your life, but then your home doesn't accept you. But even in all of that, queer people are making community in Nigeria, and that is something that I always am happy to see when I go online and I'm interacting with people that still live in Nigeria. They are making spaces for themselves. They are creating their own bubbles and safe spaces where you can explore your identity, you can have community, and you are still safe because at the root of it all is that you have to be safe as a queer person in Nigeria first and foremost before you can explore any other thing, which is kind of different in Saskatchewan in Canada where you know that you are safe for the most part. So that's not something you are constantly thinking about. I mean, of course, there is the occasional homophobia, but like physically, you know that you are safe. Like you're not going to get arrested because you are queer. That's not something you're constantly thinking about in Saskatchewan or in Canada. And that is like a sharp difference from Nigeria.
Because
So
homosexuality is a criminal offense in Nigeria still.
it technically isn't, but because of state actors and then the security and police in Nigeria, they have a way of using their power to kind of extort queer people. In the rules and statutes of Nigeria, it's not illegal to be queer, but it is illegal to have same-sex marriages or same-sex. There's a way that it's quoted in the Constitution whereby if you are caught doing activities that show that you are in a same-sex relationship, then you can be arrested. But you can't just see me on the road and be like, oh, you're a lesbian, I'm going to arrest you. But people still do that. They can just look at you and be like, you look like a gay person, so I'm just going to arrest you, even though that isn't legal, but they still do that. So those are the kind of things that people have to be careful about when you live in Nigeria as a queer person compared to when you are here in Canada and you know that you're not doing anything illegal, so nobody can just come and arrest you just because of your identity. And then speaking to your home loving you, I think that that has really gotten better just in the few years I've been here in Saskatchewan. I have met more and more queer people over the years compared to when I first came. Even I just got back from Manitoba for Winnipeg Pride, which was really interesting to see lots of people out there just celebrating Pride and being their authentic queer self. I think Winnipeg is also in the prairies, so that counts as prairie pride. Yeah, it was really great. And not just saying like queer people and white people. I also saw a lot of Black queer people, which is something that I've always tried to see in the prairies. Because if you go into Toronto or to like the Black queer scene there is much more prominent than here in the prairie. So it was really amazing to see that as well. And I'm hoping to see that also this weekend at Regina Pride as well.
Yeah, you spend most of your time in Regina, but you're doing some work back and forth from Estevan and some smaller communities. And so how are you seeing queerness present? Are you seeing queerness present in those communities?
I don't know that I'm seeing queerness present at the time, but like my workplace now, because I was there last week or so, and I was like, oh, it's June, and they're like, oh yeah, let's bring out our pride flag, and then they brought out the pride flag and like just put it out in the office and put it all over everybody's desk at the office because my office is in Alameda, Saskatchewan, which is a pretty tiny town in Saskatchewan. And then when I'm in Estevan, I think there is a bit of community there, but I haven't really explored that since I'm only there like half the time and not as much. But that is something I would hope to explore more and more.
Yeah, but is that one of the goals of working in those communities is to kind of pave the way, maybe find it. It's interesting hearing another guest talk about it was there, but didn't know it was there, and like I'm wondering if some of the work for you at Adoyan is to find that space, create that space in these smaller
Yeah,
communities? Like Alameda's small.
yeah, for me, absolutely. I would want to discover more queer people there and kind of have community there as well and see what it's like being a queer person in an even smaller city than Regina or Saskatoon, which are the major cities in Saskatchewan, and then exploring what that would be like in Oxbow or in Carlisle, Candorf, Estevan. Those are places I visit while I'm working. So I would definitely want to see what the community like would be there for me
So
and
far,
for other people living there.
do you feel safe in those communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel safe. Like, cause I was just we're having like a lunch in the backyard at the office, and then for some reason the conversation just went into queerness. For some reason, I don't know. And then they were like, yeah, like most people in the ag communities in Saskatchewan they're okay, they are cool having queer people. Like all my colleagues have farms, they have ag backgrounds and farm backgrounds, and they're all okay and love that I'm a queer lesbian in their midst. Though they did say there were the occasional people that are not as open-minded and are like the A word. But yeah, so those guys are not in the majority. But for the most part, I do feel safe and I do feel accepted and welcome in those communities as well.
So, Adedoyin, the last time we spoke, you were part of this public campaign with Tyler, Social Made Local, but you hadn't had the conversation with your mom. Have you since had that conversation?
Yeah, I have come out to my parents now. That was earlier this year. And yeah, my mom was losing her mind, but she's fine now for the most part. I just thought you guys know me, you've known me since I was born, and this is like just one other part of me that I have kept from you all these years. And I feel like I don't want to keep hiding who I am from you. I don't want to keep having to think about what it would be to you to find out that your daughter is queer. And I told them, I was like, this doesn't really have anything to do with you. It's not your failing as a parent. You didn't do anything bad or you did not do anything. People are just queer, you know? So I told my mom that for the first few days, she wasn't having it at all. She wasn't happy at all. But then over time, then she just called me one day. I was like, so you're not even going to call me to check up on me? And that was my way of figuring out that, oh, she's fine. She's all right with it. And then she went on and told my dad. I didn't tell her to tell him, but she went and told him. So now they both know and they're both fine. I didn't get disowned or anything. So that was like my highest fear that my parents would disown me. So that didn't happen. So I'm quite happy with where we are.
You're chuckling as you share it, but like, my goodness, it's got to be the hardest thing, one of the hardest things you've ever done.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now looking at it in hindsight, that is one of the hardest things I've ever done because they were like the only other two people that I care about the most in the world that were not aware of this part of my identity. And I was like, I feel like it's just time that you guys know this. And I think the distance also helped because they're not in Canada. It would have been a different conversation if I was in Nigeria and I was telling them. So because of we've been apart for some time, they've been able to kind of come to terms with some decisions that I've made. And they're like, well, I mean, you are an adult and we can't really like punish you or do anything about it. So we're just going to have to find a way to live with it and we still love you. So, yeah.
Are you going to be able to go back to Nigeria?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can go back to Nigeria. I just don't really have plans of going to Nigeria for now. But there is a big family event coming up, probably like a burial or something. So most of the grandkids and kids will be there for that.
Then you'll go?
Yeah, I will go if I have the time and the money. Because, flights to Nigeria are not exactly cheap.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I would love to be in Nigeria. The community there is so different, and I would love to just experience that again. It has been quite a minute since I've been in a space with just Nigerians and just queer people doing stuff.
Yeah. Kelly, as Adedoyin was sharing his story, you were applauding, you were clapping. Can you tell me what you were thinking about?
I was just thinking about like the coming out experience as a whole. Like, it's such a universal experience, but it's also not, in terms of almost all of us have to go through it on a regular basis, right? When we meet new people, we go through it. Like, it's not just a one-time thing. It's a perpetual life experience that we all have to go through. And I think it gradually gets easier and easier. But if you have some of those negative experiences, it can be tough as well. Like, it makes you want to be more closed off because, oh, this person had a bad reaction. What if the next person does, right? I think a lot of coming out, and for some, I'm thinking of a scene in Ted Lasso with Colin in the show where he says that when he was trying to come out to Isaac, he's like 99% of me knew that you would be okay with it, but the 1% is what scared me. And I think that's a pretty consistent experience for a lot of people. Because there was a lot of people in my life where I'm like, I'm very confident that you would be fine with it. But on the off chance I'm wrong, I could potentially ruin my relationship with you for the rest of my life. And that was something where, depending on the person, I wasn't ready to risk that. It was a situation that I couldn't do, whether that was for like my personal safety or if it was just because like I love that person and I wanted them in my life. So I was just so excited that although it seemed like there was some negative experience at the beginning, that it's a little bit more positive now. I was pretty excited for Adedoyan.
Yeah, and Nick, you are nodding along as well, so clearly you share.
I think we all share this coming out experience. Again, coming out isn't a one-time thing. I come out constantly, all the time, just existing. I am always coming out. But I think the idea of a queer space is that you don't have to fear necessarily, depending on what queer space you're in, but you don't have to fear that, or you don't even necessarily have to come out. You're kind of just like letting people know who you are.
Yeah.
But when you're in a space that's not queer, that doesn't know anything about your community or who you might be or where you might come from, you're afraid of the judgment. You're afraid because you don't know what those people think about your community. You're trying to put yourself in their shoes, but also leave room for yourself in your own shoes. It's a huge, scary mess coming out because you have to come to terms with people knowing a very private part of yourself, but it's a private part of yourself that is supposed to be expressed. I don't know.
Not be private.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a point that you have to get beyond, you know, it's like I have to go from this person that I am now to the person that I want to be. And that speed bump in between is telling people, which is really uncomfortable.
What I find so interesting is like hearing you talk and then knowing that you're part of this really public campaign and like the heart that all of you have put into this T-shirt campaign. Kelly, can you speak to, why you wanted to be out and in front of this this year's Pride campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. This might be a little repetitive of the interview that I did with Tyler for the campaign, and I get this is a very similar experience across queer individuals or gender diverse individuals, is that there's usually or sometimes a point where you feel like you'll never get to live the way you want to live. And part of the reason I felt that way growing up is because I never saw it. It was never taught in schools. It was never really shown on media at the time, at least media that I was allowed to view or was viewing at the time. Never really talked about it on the news unless it was usually in some type of negative light or direction. So it was just this constant narrative of like this was wrong, or this is something where that you keep it to yourself. You keep it at home, but in public you don't do that. So as I grew up and learned about these things and learned that it was okay, I just looking back and being reflective, it's like I wish, not to flex, but like I wish I had someone like me to look up to when I was that age. Like young me would be so like, holy smokes, Kelly, you're so cool. Like you're so cool. You're doing the thing. You're doing the thing you always wanted to do. Like that's crazy. So I just, even if it only helps, this sounds so cliche, even if it only helps like one person, like they see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like there is a way for you to be open and proud of who you are in the place you want to live and where you grew up. I think that's so important to have.
Tyler, any final words? We're almost at the end, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm so proud of all the folks that were able to join us today on the call, and I'm just so proud of all the folks that I get to work with Social Made Local. I think, to build on what everyone's been saying, I think when we're talking about the coming out process, when we're talking about where you make home, I think, if you're not a queer person, sometimes you take for granted that sometimes the simplest things of just existing in a place are like a constant coming out process. Like when I go to renew my mortgage, I'm asked, well, do you have a spouse? Is it like, do you have a wife? Do you have a whatever? When I go to business networking things, are you going to bring your wife to the golf tournament? Well, for starters, I'm not going to go golfing. That's just a whole other thing. For seconders, no, I'm not bringing out a wife. But, navigating the medical system, I mean, there's a lot of things in there. Like, if you ever have to deal with the police, like, those are things. Like, I remember, when I was younger, even getting pulled over for a speeding ticket and feeling like, am I going to get yelled at from this person if I speak with a lisp or something? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, like, those are things that, like, I think that's for me, like, what this shirt is about, is finding your place in your community and being able to, like, normalize queer existence in a way that, like, I don't know, I think sometimes people have this idea that we're like, that there's this like, big gay agenda that we want all these like special rights. And it's like, no, like we want to be able to like get sick. Not get sick, but when we get sick, we want to be able to go to the hospital and get treated like any other person and not have like weird questions or different things. So I think that's for me is like just finding comfort in places where you live and just having all the things that people take for granted just feel normal, right?
In Saskatchewan. We have to end it there. It's been wonderful talking to all of you. Tyler Babiy, Nick Hoffert, Kelly Lamb, and Adedoyin Afolabi. You can find this year's designs online by searching for Prairie Made Local. You are also sure to see these shirts worn on folks in Regina's Pride Parade this Saturday and Saskatoon's Pride Parade on June 28th.